My name is Steven Schmid. I'm an interdisciplinary artist from Nassau, the Bahamas, and I currently live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I only started calling myself an artist like 5 years ago. So even though I made work and was very rigorous in my practice, and I went to school and studied and, like exhibited in several countries and stuff, I think only about 5 years ago, I accepted the responsibility of what I thought an artist was. When I went back to school for art, and I didn't really have that much money or anything like that, I stayed away from canvas and I just kind of worked on paper. And I found, again, like with Heino being an artist, I found myself kind of paralleling a lot of the work that he was doing, and him also just inviting me into the studio and giving me materials. So like paper and like pastel, graphite, charcoal, that sort of stuff. I started out with those. But I think like this idea of like bringing a lot of different things together became very important. And I found like those things kind of just grew over the years, but the paper has always been like a big part of it. And I really liked the ephemerality of it, the access to it. I like how it can be something like very small and minimal and take up hardly no space, and then at some moments it can be unfolded and put together in a way that can take up like a lot of space. And I found that to be a very appealing thing with the material, and over the years I'm just like, whenever I have the chance to like go into something else, I always go back to paper. I think the initial thing was like it was just too expensive. I like things that are easily accessible. And I found like I learned that a lot from my mom. Like she always just used things around her, and she'd always just be like, just use what you got. Like you ain't gotta, you don't have to go out and get like all these new things. So I find like the ease, the accessibility of it was a lot better than canvas. And like I said, it was just, I don't know, it was just like it can be folded up and like brought back to, you can add it together. It was just easily adaptable. So my creation process, I parallel a lot of hip hop production. So I'm very interested in ideas around like sampling and what does it mean to sample, and what does it mean to have something that is considered an end product be broken back down and reformed and have a new life. And I taught myself production back in like 2010. So I was making a lot of like music and stuff using apps like FL Studio and Ableton and stuff like that. And I realized that the things that I was interested in with music paralleled a lot of like the things I was interested in visually. So I made this kind of like conscious decision to have hip hop production inform every aspect of my making process. So whether and it was just simply asking like, what would this look like visually? I think this is also like one of the things I loved about hip hop production as well, is how it became this sort of like alternate way to document life. Like one of the things I used to do is like when I used to buy albums, like I used to look through the credits and stuff like that and see who produced what, and you start to figure out like a kind of lineage, like a linkage of people, like, oh, this person worked on this album, this samples this song from the 70s and blah blah blah. And it was like these things sort of came together in a way that was like, it wasn't like a coded language, but you had to almost like do the work in order to understand where the history and stuff was. And I find like a lot of my work is kind of like that. Like I know there's a lot kind of in there, but a lot of things inside of it show up. A lot of people show up in it in different ways. Maybe literally through smiles, teeth, maybe different body parts and stuff. But sometimes they're symbolized through different things, maybe flowers or like different other symbols and stuff like that. But then I also think of like the kind of like, what if you don't have any of those things? Like how can someone enter the work? And like, for example, like one of the things I started doing was a few years ago when I started this whole paper making thing. I realized that you needed a sheet to kind of lay the things on. And I remember when I first was doing this at a residency in Victoria, and I had to get this bed sheet out of a little thrift store. And I was like very interested in like where that sheet came from. But when I came here for my show in 2023, I needed another sheet to make more work. And my mom had a sheet from my grandmother. And I was like, oh, like I only have a few photos of her, that I've probably used a couple of times. And I was very interested in like, okay, like maybe this is how she can access the work. So when you're making paper, whatever you place it on, it kind of has like that imprint of whatever the thing is. And I found that for her to be in the work, like that was one way. Like it's kind of invisible and nobody's gonna see it, but it's like, for me, it's a part of the process, the beginning of the process, to kind of think of like, when I have her in there and then I start using images or symbols to represent family and friends and whatever, like it kind of like builds up. So the work ends up being this weird, like this very big communal conversation.